This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
BTW, FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an adjustral implant, 68 milligrams radiopaque. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
Hey, I'm Frank, and I have hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Before starting Cosentyx, I was so uncomfortable with my symptoms, like not being able to sleep on white sheets or wear white clothes. Now I can appreciate the little things.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if allergic to Cosentyx. Get checked for TB before starting. Increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like TB or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if IBD symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
You're stronger than HS. Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I was momentarily thrown there, Kieran, because you had a serious look on your face, which is it's obviously you've changed it now to a big old cheesy grin. I was momentarily. There was no finger pointing with your countdown and nothing. You okay?
I'm slacking.
Yeah,
I need to get back in the zone.
It'll be this heat, which is not natural. We have an extra pod for everyone today, Kieran. We have an interview we've been waiting for a while, and it's well worth the wait, I think, particularly if you're a West Bromwich Albion fan, because it's an interview with Shilen Patel, who's the majority shareholder and chairman of West Bromwich Albion, and this is what Shilen had to say about a range of things. Shilen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's very kind of you. We've been looking forward to talking to you. We've had lots of fans of the Albion who tell us we have to say the Albion, who've thrown in some questions as well. Before we talk about football and the Albion, just tell us a little bit about yourself first and your background.
So I've born and raised in the United States. Have professionally. Have always been fascinated by business and entrepreneurship. And so about a week after I finished my undergraduate studies, I bought a software company and set about growing it. And, that was supposed to be 2-3 years, grow it and sell it and move on to the next thing. That ended up being about a decade of my life. And I liked it so much that I decided to go and buy another one thereafter. So, my day job really for most of my life and career has been running technology companies, but also, just kind of reveling in the versatility of business. So doing a lot of, private equity type deals. As a family, we're very big into hotel real estate, insurance, a lot of different sectors. Businesses in the US, in India, and Africa. So have just always been kind of wrapped up and fascinated by and kind of had joy with the global nature of business and the diversity of things that a business background can get you into.
Let's not talk about hotels, Sheila, because it'll just set Kieran off about Chelsea again. So we'll move on from that. The biggest question, I suppose, for all of our listeners is why did you decide to invest in English football in the first place, and why did you choose West Brom, a club that had a turbulent few seasons off the pitch?
I think as far as, the fascination with football, that's been something that really my entire adult life, I've just kind of been enjoyed the game. I will admit, growing up, it was not central to my life in the United States, other than, the odd, World Cup, kind of momentum. It wasn't really front and center as a sport. In '98, after, just ahead of going to college, I, happened to, have the opportunity to go around Europe with some friends. And of course, that was the summer of France '98. And started, actually, believe it or not, my first stop was Birmingham, coincidentally. Was there with some family friends, and we went all the way, over through to East Europe and back, and just seeing the way that people just sort of engaged with the game, how much it meant. Being in Prague, and just seeing kind of a group of fans just kind of gathering at a bar because their country was playing, and all of that camaraderie and all of that kind of, and of course the elite play. It really sort of, it captured my attention. And then when you go to college, one of the rites of passage and one of the social things is, of course, video games, and FIFA World Cup, and FIFA was amongst those. I was rooting for England. I'd taken a liking to England. Not knowing much else about the game, but so had always been fascinated with the Premier League, and then had the experience of sort of falling in love with the league and the game from thousands of miles away, which is really, as now is the modern way. I mean, it's not something where you have to be in a certain town or in a certain neighborhood to appreciate a team, just given the way that information circulates, the community is created. So I was always fascinated by football, and to me, the global aspect of it, the fact that it exists everywhere, that all of these, links in the chain kind of come together, through kind of the way the international sport works. And then, for the same reason that people love this podcast, I really love the business of football. It's every business rolled into one. You've got it's obviously a sporting club. It's a media business. It's an entertainment and event business. It's real estate. It's catering. It's technology. So I just, as somebody who is a certified business nerd, I just loved how it all kind of wrapped together in football, and obviously just the impact that it makes on people's lives when done right. And so to me, it was something from the time I was probably 19 years old. So, for a quarter century now, it's something that I had aspired to do. Had my first opportunity to kind of dip my toe in about a decade ago, get a sense of what was, what I felt made for a good opportunity, what would make the right club for me. And one of my big takeaways from that experience was just that I wanted to be, I wanted to be influential in the future of a club, and find the right way to be involved, and the right club to be involved with. As far as as far as the Albion goes, it was not something that I was looking at from the outside in. I was looking at generally at opportunities in football. Had a goal of maybe kind of starting with kind of a smaller club, smaller league, and sort of building upwards from there. Honestly, had thought I was sort of priced out of England just based on the parameters that I had set of what what made sense as an acquisition. And then one day was just kind of this opportunity came across my desk. I was able to take a closer look at it. I flew out to the West Midlands and was able to meet with the people, see the stadium and everything. And I have a certain set of criteria that I apply when I'm looking at these opportunities, and this club really, it met everything that I wanted to, and exceeded my expectations in terms of what I was expecting, given all of the external turmoil that you were all the turmoil you were seeing from the outside.
You said that's interesting about criteria, because you said in one of your first interviews here that when you first came to West Brom, you were searching for red flags. Mm-hmm. So how many red flags did you find?
Not many that weren't evident from the outside. Right. And, I think those are all, solvable problems. I think if, depending on your plan to work through them. So, the types of things that I thought I might be seeing, we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Hawthorns this year. When you think about a building that was sort of nominally constructed in 1900, you can imagine what you're expecting when you show up. But
Yeah.
and thanks in part to their recent times in the Premier League, the stadium had been really well looked after. Every area of the stadium had in relatively recent times, had a refreshing, had some refreshing done. So it wasn't, this rickety building that was about to fall over with barely usable sections and things. It was, and it compared favorably to other stadiums I've been to in England, which is maybe more than what I was expecting. But I think that was great to see the training ground and having a level 1 academy, understanding the importance of academy development, and the importance of the resources that you surround players with. That was a very important piece. So, I think that the red flags were the obvious ones. They were the ones that you could see in the accounts.
Yeah.
You could very, quickly extrapolate what the reasons were for having gotten into that situation. And then, we just had to underwrite how much it took to get out of that situation and make ourselves comfortable with it.
The history of West Brom is a fascinating one. This is for a different pod, and I've been researching it recently for a different project, but I've read there's about 27 different reasons why they say they're called the Baggies. None of which make any sense whatsoever, to be perfectly honest. But I suppose one of the big red flags, how did you feel about inheriting some pretty big loan repayments when you took on the club?
It's something that we had to look at. The first conversation that I had before I spoke to the seller was with the lender. So just kind of understanding the disposition of the loan, their mindset regarding the club, and just making sure that those were the people that I was going to have to live with if I moved forward. So I think just understanding where they stood was very important. And so I had a very positive conversation. The lender, MSD Capital, they were quite bullish on the future and kind of the underlying potential of the club. They were very excited about the prospect of somebody coming in who wanted to kind of work with intent to bring the club back to prior levels of success and sustainability. But that was actually a very affirming conversation, because I think in those discussions, they told me that they've looked at every club in football, as a prospective borrower, or as an actual borrower. And I think that their assessment of where this club, sort of stood in terms of overall health and potential was a very affirmatory conversation to have. And they got comfortable with me, so we were able to understand kind of how we could work through the debt, how we could work through the debt, roll it over. And so that was a big part of the conversation. The terms they're public. They're not great terms, but we did feel like there was a path forward, and that we had a lender who wasn't going to try to rack us with the covenants that were there. They were going to let us do what was needed to rehabilitate the club.
That's interesting. You mentioned dipping a toe in the water as well. So you had a minority share in Bologna.
Mm-hmm.
Did that prepare you at all for English football?
I think quite a bit, and I think just I always want to be clear about this. I as an LP, I was not part of the decision making group. I think as we were getting into the investment, we were all aligned on what we thought made sense for the club, which was a sustainable build up. You look at Bologna, you see a lot of parallels. Bologna is, I think, the third wealthiest market per capita in Italy. That's not all, or at least was at the time of the acquisition, which is not a well-known thing. They were a very popular area for corporate headquarters and things, so there was a strong commercial base. In the case of Bologna, of course, it's a single club city, so you had that aspect going for you. But generally, we looked at it and we said there's a way to kind of sustainably build this club up to past success. And Joey took the lead in that and has done everything that club has needed. And so I would say, in terms of what I learned from that, nothing is as it seems on the surface, right? So you get in, you have this prospectus, and of course, there's a group of people who are not able to keep it going forward, and you're maybe getting the rosier picture. You're not. Not every liability is there on the surface, and some countries are easier to do business in than others. Transparency in England is levels above what it is in a lot of other countries, and the requirements for transparency. So I think that was a big part. Is just there were a lot of surprises with Bologna, and I was able to add those to my list of potential red flags. But I think the biggest lesson there, Joey was somebody who was all about doing the right thing, understood the obligation and the responsibility to the fans, high integrity person. And so I think it was a great template, among a few others that I was able to take into what type of owner, what type of chairman I wanted to be.
Bologna is an amazing city, and it's got to be said, since you first went to Birmingham in 1998, there's been an incredible change in that city. In the middle, as my in-laws are from Birmingham, so I've seen it happen. The middle of Birmingham in particular is spectacular now. Has that made it easier for you to recruit staff, to recruit players?
I think it helps. I mean, I think that everybody, you look around Birmingham, you can see the cranes there. The transit and all of those things are very solid. It's incredibly easy to get, from certainly from London to Birmingham and go back and forth. And I think it's a city on the rise. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest kind of beneficiaries of kind of looking at growth beyond the capital city. And so I think that I think it's always great to do that. And, London will have its own challenges against a metro like Birmingham, cost of living, inventory, all of those types of things. So I think that we stand in good stead as a great opportunity in football, even when you think about it compared to, obviously the lights of London and all of that as well.
Shilen, can I ask you a general question about what the attraction of English football is to US investors? And can you also understand why some English football fans are wary of the amount of US investors coming into the game? We get all these conspiracy theories. As soon as we get 14 American owners in the Premier League, it will be franchise, no relegation. Do you understand why some English fans are a bit concerned?
Certainly. I mean, I think that there's, there have been some high profile stories of people not understanding what they bought. And I think even before, American investors became very prevalent in football, that was a challenge, whether it was, the wealthy, the wealthy, local owner done good, or like, kind of local businessman done good or come good, or whether it was, somebody from Asia or other parts of Europe. But I think in general, I completely understand why clubs are very protective. I mean, fans are very protective, supporters are very protective over their clubs. And I think it is beholden upon the people who come into these clubs to demonstrate that they understand what's expected. And there's that natural tension. It has to work, not just as a fan experience and all of that. It has to work as a business. But I think that we're seeing more and more that there's a pathway to achieving both that can be gratifying to the fans. And I think that comes from people respecting the history of the game. So I think it would not just take 14 American owners. It would take 14 American owners with no appreciation for what makes what makes English football great, to get to that outcome. And I don't think that we're anywhere close to that scenario.
As a new owner from outside English football, I'm really interested to learn what you made of the profit and sustainability rules when you first took over West Brom.
I understand the intentions of the system. I think like any regulatory system, there's a lot there. It always needs to be looked at because there's the arms race between what are the rules and what are the exemptions, and it always needs to be looked at. And I look the EFL and in particular with 72 clubs with wildly varying situations. I commend them for trying to work on a system that makes sense across all pieces. It can be challenging when somebody is particularly innovative, or if somebody's particularly ambitious. Then obviously, so from a selfish standpoint, I appreciate that they exist because I wouldn't be taking this on if there weren't at least some kind of some backstop to what is expected of ownership in order to kind of keep a club competitive and what other clubs are going to do or be willing to do in the short term, at the expense of the long term. So I appreciate that the system exists, but I think at times when we think we're being quite clever and staying within the rules, to try to make sure that we're, without having to just go to the old, kind of the old fallback of selling your best player or what have you. That we've tried to do a lot of different things, and in fact, I think we've educated ourselves on the rules. There were rules that weren't applied correctly to the club, and so we were able to, on paper, just by educating ourselves on the whole system and seeing what other clubs did, we were able to pull some things back. We've also tried at times to present the league with what we think is a reasonable interpretation of the rules, and there's concern how those things parlay across 72 different different recipients of the rules, and so I think it's important that something's in place. I think it's important that we always look to say, well, does this continue to be a consistent set of system of rules? What is are all of the desired purposes being achieved without any unintended consequences? So I think it's important to look at, and it's hard in a collective system like this where people have to vote on changes for everybody to agree that a change needs to be made. So I have appreciation for the difficulty of it, but I think, yeah.
Would you perhaps favour a different type of P&S rules, one based on salary cap, for example, rather than one on losses?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, I find it odd that as you move through the tiers, the rules are different at different tiers. So I think at a minimum, there should be some consistency. I think moving from P&S to at least, kind of the squad cost ratio system, and then more broadly, I mean, I think there's long conversations about other things that could work, like a luxury tax or something. But I think that there's a way to balance what the highest revenue clubs want to do with something that keeps the league interesting, which I'm concerned is something that is going away. If you look at last Premier League season,
sure.
And I know as Palace fans, you had a lot of dynamic, a lot of potential outcomes there, but just generally, you knew who was going to win the league, you knew who was going to be relegated. And so there was just little bits in the middle left to be worked out versus the championship, which with all the parity that it has, with 2 weekends left to go, everyone in the club or everyone in the league was either in a position to potentially make the playoffs or potentially be relegated, which I think, that speaks to the type of balance that you would want. And I think even moving between tiers, you would want to see people faring differently and there to be a little bit more parity.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Well, we had a situation last year when Newcastle won the Carabao Cup, Palace won the FA Cup. So you had a team owned by the richest country in the world and a team owned by American billionaires winning 2 cups, and everybody thought that was romantic. which is ridiculous. Two very wealthy teams, and that's the situation we've reached. Shilen, I just want to bring Kieran in here just for a moment, if I can, because you touched on a subject that is baffling to me and a lot of our listeners. Kieran, why have we reached a situation where there are different sets of P&S rules across the league? So that doesn't seem to make sense to anyone.
Well, to a certain extent, it reflects the individuality of the EFL in the sense that there are different types of owners in the Championship. You've got those clubs that have just been relegated from the Premier League with Premier League contracts. I mean, West Brom faced that 2 or 3 years ago and the complications that brought. So having a wage cap potentially could have given them an advantage when you've got parachute payments. If you drop down into League One and League Two, where they have had this strange system where you do have a wage cap, but if the owner puts money in, effectively you can buy yourself out of those divisions. The owners in the Championship didn't like that because I suspect, this might have put you off buying the club, in the sense that if you knew that somebody could come in and put in an extra 50 million of equity, that goes straight into the wage bill. You're getting 100% an allowance for it. That just creates an arms race in terms of wages. So it is a strange one. I think it simply reflects the different sizes of clubs and the different objectives of owners.
Do you know what, Shilen? I just realised it's very amiss of me not to congratulate you. You've got a new season, new manager, and 3 points to start with. I meant to do that at the top of the interview, so you must be feeling quite good about yourself at the moment.
Yeah, we're on pace for an undefeated season, so long may it continue. I think it's really important never to get too high, too low. We started with, I think, 5 wins in 6 matches and undefeated last season, and the championship is just such a roller coaster. So and I think that the mindset in the building with Ryan as well, I think very, very level headed. I look forward to seeing how we deal with the ups and downs this year.
Yeah, it's good to see somebody with a great reputation as a coach, but not necessarily as a manager, getting a chance to manage at a club like West Brom, a big club like West Brom.
Yeah, it was important, I think, in terms of what the type of person that we were looking for. Somebody who really kind of understands and has lived in the process of making the players better, and somebody who understands that we don't want to run a model, which has, I think, been part of the destabilizing history of the club, where the new manager comes in and they dictate everything about how everything is done. We wanted somebody who understood the resources in place, was looking for those pieces to be in place, and wanted to be part of a system. And so I think that Ryan has the right mindset for what we want to do. And I think we really want the story of the club to be that we make players better. Just the realities of the game and the economics of the game. That's an important part of what we do. But you really have to be committed through that, from the academy through to the coaching staff, through sports science and recruitment and all of these places, is that you're looking to put a group of people together who understand that if we do our job right, some of these players will be part of the best clubs in the world.
Yeah. Just to touch again on P&S rules, Shilen, because you'd be amazed how interested our listeners are in these things. You've adopted a quite strict data analytics model since you took over. Was that partly to deal with P&S rules?
I think to a certain extent. I think it's about being cost efficient and resource efficient. There are clubs that will fly scouts to South America to watch a player 5 times before they bid. If we wanted to cast a wider net, we needed to have a better toolkit to be able to do that. And I think our strategy and our approach has been, if we can figure out which of these players extrapolates well to the league that we're in, we can look at markets where transfer fee expectations are lower, where the wage jump from the league that they're in to the championship is something that's appreciable and desirable for the player. So I think it's about resource efficiency. It is about finding players before other people know that they're good.
We always like to ask our club fans of our listeners. So we ask West Brom fans if they've got any questions for you. Kieran's got one for you from a celebrity West Brom fan later on. But there's one question we had which I thought was an interesting one. Is like, when you first took over, were there any decisions you had to make that you found particularly difficult?
I think obviously there's a broad decision about when you come into a club, especially or in any business that's been in distress, to try to triage whether the people that are there and the setup and the organizational setup that's there, that all of those things are, whether they contributed to the situation or whether they can contribute to moving out of the situation. I'm thankful to say that it's a difficult decision on kind of, build on the people there or kind of clear out. And I'm thankful to say that when we looked around at the people there, a lot of people had gone, whether it was through financial, through other aspects of the crisis. And I think what we found is that the people there were really committed to making things better, that they could have left, that they chose to stay there, and that they wanted to see the club come around. And so I think we were fortunate in the sense that the answer to our difficult decision was not was not difficult. But I think that we looked at coaching, we looked at sporting, we looked at the administrative side, and we felt good about the people that we were starting the journey with, and that they could that was one less thing that we could worry about, and we could just set about challenges. I think the squad was a big challenge. Because again, there's a lot of players that had been through a lot of things with the club there and a lot of seasons, but the contracts didn't make sense. And, would be nice to have some of those players given their pedigree, but we needed to be committed to just saying, okay, well, the priority here, we need to get squad age down. We need to get payroll down, or we have no chance with dealing with the 2 to 3 kind of season P&S challenge that we've got ahead of us.
One fan asked us a more general question, but I thought it was a very interesting one. He's basically saying, when you arrived in English football, looking at it from an American perspective, was there one thing about the game in England and its finances that you just go, this doesn't make any sense? Why do they do this? Is there one glaring thing that you would say that the English football needs to sort this out?
Well, so I would say, of course, I think importantly, like I'd been following English football for almost 25 years before jumping in, and frankly was always more interested in the business side than the tactics and the players and all of that. But I think the one thing that was, and this goes back some time, but if you go back to the sale of Cristiano Ronaldo from United to Real or whatever, and it was some absurd amount of money, but remember thinking to myself that how many clubs in the world could you buy for the amount that one club played for one player?
Yeah.
And that to me was I think there's no parallel to that sort of that sort of imbalance and in any other sport there or really business that I follow. So I think in that regard, it also pointed to the opportunity, which is that you have this asynchronous view of value and something that could transform the fortunes of one club could end up being an expensive mistake for another club that they don't think about a season later. So I think that was always really fascinating to me is, the value of players versus sometimes the outright value of clubs, depending on who the buyer is.
What are your views on the independent regulator?
It's you don't always celebrate, the introduction of regulation, but I think I've now been around the conversation. It was expected to a change in the solidarity rules was understood to be agreed and imminent. Going back to 2023 when I was looking at the club, and I think it's unfortunate that 14 out of 20 can't agree on some of the particulars, and that made it impossible to move forward. So it's not something that I celebrate or necessarily feel should be necessary in a perfect world. But I think in an imperfect world where internal disagreements are holding up something that otherwise has been agreed to be a sensible thing for the good of the game, I think it's important. And I also think if you look at the way that as you go down the pyramid, some of these clubs are the economic pillar of their communities. And you can't take that lightly. So it's not just about, we're the big clubs and we make all the money, et cetera. It's the value that these clubs have to keeping, towns and cities thriving is something that it is, I think, a matter of national interest when you go down the pyramid and you look at how important these clubs are in the places that they've been for so long.
Talking of the pyramid, Shilen, as well, since you came into West Brom, have you been surprised by the obsession with the Premier League? And certainly championship clubs, their fans seem to only judge success in the championship by whether they get out of it in the right direction, of course. And fans are not necessarily that worried about the financial sustainability of spending money you haven't got to do so. Do you get that obsession with the Premier League? Do you share it? Do you think that the only judge of success in football is to be in the Premier League?
It's certainly not the only judge of success, but I think it's absolutely, it's certainly my dream and my ambition to be in the Premier League and to do what the club had been doing for a long, long time before, which is being a pretty much a fixture in the first tier, and you go down from time to time, but you always find your way back home. And so to me, I think it's a very meaningful goal, and I think when we think about our approach if we are able to, going back to the recruitment, if we're able to find Premier League quality players, those players will either get us to the Premier League or they will fund our journey back. But I think it's important that it is sustainable. And our business model and our base case is that we need to be able to survive in the championship indefinitely. And so we treat it to some degree as a secondary goal, because we can't, if we predicate everything on that, then we're going to make decisions that don't fit this level. But we think there's a way to balance both. I mean, ultimately, I think what's been surprising to me is really kind of the rising quality of the championship. Yeah. When I think about the championship 10, 15 years ago, it was a different game. Now you have, all of these practices, personnel that you might have expected to see in the Premier League, you see them down in the championship. And I think that's great for the quality. And so I really see, kind of on the limited resources that it has comparative to the Premier League, the championship has really kind of risen in level. And kind of the quality of what you see there, the quality of the players that come through there. So I think the championship is an attractive league, but I think if you ask all 24 clubs in the championship, they'll tell you where they'd rather be.
Yeah. You've got Tom Brady down the road at Birmingham. So how does it feel? How does it feel to have a celebrity rival?
I think it's good. I think it's great for the game. Him and now you've got Snoop Dogg over at Swansea. I think everybody brings different things to the club, and I think that it is important to have visibility as a club, as a league, and I think it can only help us, collectively and globally, to have people like that and clubs like Wrexham. It's novel, but I think that especially in the U.S., it's helpful in growing, in growing the game. And I think that over time, a lot of the teams that clubs have followed in the Premier League, they find them in the Championship now. So I think it's a good mix for visibility. I think every group has to decide what they're looking for when they bring in different partners. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a good get for them.
I've got one more question for you, Shilen, and I'm going to get Kieran to ask the celebrity question for you to end. I'd like to say it's an uplifting question, but I know who it's from, so it may not necessarily be so. But right at the very start of the process at West Brom, within a couple of weeks, you gave an interview to The Telegraph, I think it was, in which you said that buying West Bromwich Albion had changed your life. Is that a sentiment? Because I think, listening to you now, you're so very positive, you're so very enthusiastic about the club, obviously. But I was just fascinated, as somebody who loves English football and as somebody whose life has been enriched by English football, it's fascinating to hear you say that already it had changed your life, and I presume in a good way.
Mostly in a good way. I think it's an expensive pursuit. But I think that generally, if you go back to what I talked about with my background, there's not many people when you're out at a dinner party and you say, oh, well, I run an enterprise software company that adjudicates claims for health insurance. Well, that's about the end of that conversation.
Let's Kieran say, yeah.
But yeah, so I think just, I've spent most of my career doing things that I would say are rather niche and in the background. And even though they were very impactful in the venues in which they happened, it's never really been of general interest how I apply my time or what decisions I'm making. So I think, that aspect of it is just, I think that being involved in something that means so much to so many people, I think it certainly changes a lot about, wherever I go, I think what the conversations are, what the focus is. But I think just in general, I mean, from a family side, I think we've always felt like it's important to be involved with things that have relevance, after we're gone. And certainly I think I have those opportunities to do things in different ways, in India through philanthropy, in the US as well. But I think this was just certainly an opportunity. I think the most visible and clear opportunity to maybe make a difference somewhere, and not worrying about what happens just 5-10 years from now, but what it could mean, to be part of a bigger story. of the club and of the community.
And Kieran, the final question, please.
I won't give the person's full name away. We'll just call him Smethwick Adrian. You can probably fill in the gaps. And I don't know whether you've seen the Birmingham City documentary series, which is great television. But Tom Wagner said there, we thought we could make some money, have a good return, which is our ultimate objective. What would you say is your ultimate objective at the Baggies?
No matter when or under what circumstances the club moves on to a different steward, I want the club to have the experience of being fundamentally stable, secure. I would love for that legacy to involve the Premier League, and I think if you get to the Premier League, then you probably achieve Tom's goal as well. As long as you've been responsible in your path getting to it. So, I think certainly I would love to be known as a person who reestablished the club in the Premier League, and for reasons of benefit to the club. But I think that if we've done that, that means we've probably run a good business as well. If I've still got a hold of it and it's made that journey, then we've probably done some things right along the way on the business side, not just the football side.
Shilen, I want to finish, Shilen. I just, my father-in-law, God rest his soul, when he lived in Quinton for most of his life, his next door neighbour was a chap called Sandy, who was a West Brom fan, who would be so delighted if he was still with us to know that I was talking to the owner of West Brom. But he had what I can only describe as a classic West Midlands attitude to life. In that, in the morning, you'd say, "Morning, Sandy," and he'd go, "Yeah, it won't last." And he'd go, "Thanks." So it's great that you're bringing to you've turned around. We talked about West Brom a lot in the first 3 or 4 years of this podcast. I hope that in the future we can be talking to the new owners of clubs like Morecambe and Sheffield Wednesday, maybe who would do the same thing to their club. But in the meantime, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been a real pleasure, and good luck with the rest of the season and keeping that unbeaten record.
Thank you. Looking forward to it, and look forward to chatting with you guys again in the future.
I have to say, Kieran, I was very impressed with Shilen. I think if I was a West Brom fan, I would think my club was in safe hands. There were two things lots of things I took away, but the two things that particularly caught my attention. First of all, I wasn't sure whether it was the right thing to do to ask whether he's repaid the loans. So you very cleverly came up with a way of mentioning it without actually asking it. But I thought that was a really interesting insight into a responsible way of dealing with a lender or with a debt that you're taking over. That we sat down, we discussed the options. Never at any stage did he feel pressured that he had to pay it back straight away, and that's presumably a response to his positive approach. So I just wondered whether that was a usual grown-up discussion had between two people, or whether that was that's out of the ordinary.
It was the common sense thing to do. I thought Shilen was super professional. What I'm increasingly coming around to the conclusion is that common sense is not common practice. But by establishing a relationship with the lender, he was absolutely right. The terms favour MSD Holdings in terms of the interest rate being charged. And he said, right, well, we just have to take it on and move forwards. But overall, I think in every single question that we asked, his response was proportionate. It showed that he's done his homework. And in an industry where so many people come into the game with a naive failure to understand how football works, if I was a Baggies fan, I'd be absolutely delighted. Not only does he say the right things, it was clear that he's a highly intelligent guy all round, very successful, and wants to do what's right by the club. And reap the rewards as well in terms of his ambition is, as he said, West Brom have spent an awful lot of time in the top division, and that's where we want to return them.
It's a funny old game, isn't it? That's got him and Jason Whittingham in it at the same time, because they are the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. There's also one other thing he said, Kieran, which I found very interesting, because it wasn't necessarily the answer you'd expect. Because I think we might be implying that he was giving the answers that we hoped he would give, that he was doing it professionally. But I don't think he was necessarily. I think he was speaking from the heart. And this was a particular statement that made me believe that. Was he said that basically he fell in love with the business of football. That what he's obsessed with is how football runs. And he said that the fascinating thing for him is that football is 7, 8, 9 different businesses all wrapped into one, and he's just as interested in every angle of them as he is in the making money angle. And then he says, of course I like football, but the stock answer would have been to say, no, I love English football. I've always wanted to be involved in football. I love this player, that player. But I think I would rather have a manager whose first passion is business, who also likes football, rather than somebody who claims to be passionate about football and is not necessarily on top of the business side of it.
That's right. Unless you get the business side right, you can't develop the football side. I mean, I took those comments on board as well, to such an extent is that I've now copied them and put them onto a PowerPoint slide, and it's going into one of my lectures.
Oh, wow.
I've never thought of that sort of subset of individual areas. But he's absolutely right. It is about catering. It is about marketing. It is about financial cash flows and so on. And all of those other issues that he mentioned. I've just taken that word for word. And I think it was a brilliant summary of the state of the industry.
I did. I saw your face light up when he described himself as a football business and money geek. I mean, you've always got a big smile on your face, Kieran, but you were just beaming with pride, like one of your own pupils had just stood up and said, "Thank you, sir," in a kind of Dead Poet Society type way.
Very, very impressive guy, and we wish him well. Baggies, 100% start to the season.
Yeah. Still can't get to the bottom of why they're called the Baggies. I will throw out there that every single explanation I've had is nonsense. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club. We all get ad-free listing, bonus episodes, and more. Just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X and find us on YouTube. We'll be back next Tuesday with a questions episode. Yes, and the Premier League season will have started, and Palace fans will be getting their first fine from UEFA for displaying UEFA Mafia banners and singing anti-UEFA songs. So we look forward to discussing that in greater detail. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.